I'd like to call the work session to order for December 6, 2021. Mayor Lord is not here with us tonight. Everyone else is here. So we have one item on the agenda tonight. I'd like to remind council that staff will be pausing intermittently to answer any questions. Tonight's discussion is regarding the 355-acre annexation request for Terrasante. Development Services Director Christopher Baker will present. Hello, Christopher.
Good evening, Vice Mayor, Council. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you this evening and seek some policy direction regarding an annexation case that you have just referenced, about 355 acres outside of the city and southwest of Cantamilla. So tonight, what we're going to do is go over and refresh Council's memory regarding the adopted annexation policy and process. We'll provide a general description of the request. We'll look at the general plan, and then we're also going to provide you some findings regarding public services and city utilities that would serve the proposed project. And what we're asking eventually for Council tonight would be some clear policy direction on whether to proceed to work with the owner and the developer on the annexation process or not. So that'll be ultimately the question tonight. So just as a general refresher, the annexation process is very much dictated by the requirements of state law. There is a very defined sequence of events that takes place that also includes some legally mandated waiting periods. The process is likely for Terrasante to take between 8 to 10 months, and Council, as a refresher again, has 3 touch points associated with this process. The first touch point is what we're doing this evening, which is having a work session with you to seek some policy direction, and provide some staff findings, high-level staff findings for you. The next opportunity for Council to weigh in would be during the public hearing, which would be at a date to be determined. Like many of our zoning cases, or all of our zoning cases, frankly, we would have to give notice to the property owners within the area so that they have an opportunity to know and voice any concerns or objections or, frankly, support to Council during that process. So there would be a future public hearing held by Council as well. And then the last opportunity for Council input would be the actual vote when after we go through the process and through the legal process, the vote for Council to approve the annexation and bring the property into the city. So there is currently an adopted annexation policy that staff follows. And tonight we are here in accordance with that policy. It's the one with the red box around it, where we'll have a work session with you, provide some findings, and just seek some high-level policy guidance to expend staff time and hours with the associated development agreements, working with the applicant and the property owners. So Terrasante is generally located where the star is shown on that map, the northwest corner of that geography that we generally refer to as the Northern Waterman Wash, south of Cantamilla, south of Australia. It's about nearly 12 miles south of I-10, and that whole geography is about 7 miles by 8 miles. There's various different developments that you can see on the chart there within that area, within that Northern Waterman Wash area, and Terrasante is included in it. There is a portion of Terrasante that is already in the city, but tonight we're just seeking policy guidance on that 355-ish acres that's proposed to be annexed. So there you see on the left of this, on this slide, is the 355 acres. It's kind of a Tetris piece. It is located, as I said, outside of the city, but it is contiguous to the current city limits. The image on the right is a development plan for all of Terrasante, which obviously includes the area outside of the city limits currently. The current project that is in the city is about 575 acres, and they are asking to annex in the 355 acres. There would be, if we do annex this in and also work through their zoning case, there would be approximately 7,500 residents housed within Terrasante in the future. So with Terrasante, there are 3 currently active and related and very much intertwined development applications pending. We have a zoning case in that would revise land uses and address parks, trails, lot sizes, housing diversity, things of that nature, as well as provide the opportunity for commercial development within the Terrasante project. Likewise, there's the annexation case, which we're talking about tonight, the 355 acres. And then there's also an active development agreement that we have received as well, which would be, the focus of that effort would be working on the utility solutions for the project: water, sewer, fire, parks, and transportation. So these important elements that help a community develop and thrive would be addressed through the development agreement. And it is very much important to be aware that all three of these things need to happen on a concurrent path. So if we are moving forward with Terrasante as a result of the work session tonight, the annexation, then all three of these cases would proceed on a simultaneous track and come back to council at the same time, because the development agreement will provide the solutions for water, sewer, fire, parks, and transportation. So the general plan, Terrasante is located within the round, or the red ellipse, if you will. It does call out for Terrasante as neighborhoods, and what they are proposing is in conformance with the general plan. So no issues associated with the general plan at all. With fire, there is an ongoing fire station study that is very close to being complete, and the geography where Terrasante is located is included within the scope of that study. We are expecting that additional future fire stations will be needed in the northern Waterman Wash area and in the Terrasante area, and that without those additional fire stations and resources, response times would likely increase, depending on how the final roads are all designed and laid out with their connectivity and so forth. But it is a fair assumption to say that potentially in the future, without additional resources, response times would increase. One particular item to note for your consideration is that in this area of the city, for both police and fire, radio coverage does need to be improved. So it is an issue for the police department and for the fire department. And so as we move forward with the development agreement for Terrasante, we would work to help solve that additional communication issue as well. Finally, I'd just like to note that emergency medical treatment is available at Abrazo. The patient transport time to Cantamia is approximately 27 minutes. And since this property is a little bit south and west, you could reasonably expect that patient transport times would be in excess of 30 minutes to the current healthcare facilities. With regard to water and wastewater, there is no current readily available wet water for the project. And there is not a certificate of physical availability for the site either at this point in time. There is not the ability to simply tap into the existing infrastructure in Australia. And the Rainbow Valley Water Reclamation Facility does not take the flows from Terrasante into its account as it develops in the future. So these are things that have to be resolved and that we would work with the developer on through the development agreement process to create solutions. Not all of Terrasante is located within the city's current water and sewer service areas. So on this map here, get the point. There it is. The blue line is the city limits. It goes like this. This is the property that's subject to annexation, 355 acres. It is located outside of the city and also outside of our service area. The other two properties is currently located obviously in the city and in our service area, and that the water and sewer solutions for these two properties is also to be determined. So there isn't a comprehensive water and sewer solution currently for this. We're going to work with the developer and his design team in order to provide solutions moving forward if council's policy direction tonight is to work with them to annex the property. Now, there is one other element that we'd like to just bring up for council's consideration. As we evaluate annexation opportunities, we always look at properties that are adjacent to the request. And in this particular case, there are some BLM properties, some Federal Bureau of Land Management property There's about 320 acres. They're identified, the two parcels that's owned by the BLM are identified by the stars. And so we'll also be asking council tonight if you would like us to contact the BLM to see if they would be willing to have this property annexed into the city. This is separate and distinct from the Terrasante application and process and project, but it is an opportunity that we identified to expand the city limits to the west. This area is in our planning jurisdiction, and so we'll be asking council your opinion on whether or not you want us to reach out to BLM. So in accordance with council policy, the findings that we're providing for you tonight is that for Terrasante and also, frankly, the BLM property, there are no currently available or identified water and sewer solutions, and that those things need to be determined and would be determined through the development agreement process. Likely, additional fire stations and resources will need to be provided in the immediate area. And likewise, there is finally not a current regional park programmed, although I know that Nathan and his team are working on an upgrade or revisions to the park master plan. But currently, as we sit here today, there's nothing identified. But again, we would work through that issue during the development agreement process. Those are the three big things we wanted to provide council input and identify those issues for. And so if we get the direction tonight to proceed with the annexation, these items would be solved through the development agreement process. So that leads me to the policy questions. There's two. The first one is does council desire for us as staff to work with the developer and his team in order to annex the 355 acres into the city, and then also work to provide the solutions on utilities and public service delivery by development agreement? And if you do, then would you also be supportive of us reaching out to the BLM to see if they're interested in annexing that 320 acres into the city? And with that, Mr. Vice Mayor, excuse me, I'm done with my presentation and happy to stand for questions. And we also have all of the other folks here that can answer any more detailed questions if council has any.
Thank you, Christopher.
Thank you.
Questions? Bill?
Christopher, thanks for the presentation. How does this annexation in this property differ from the one we did about a year ago? From location, challenges, et cetera?
You're talking, Vice Mayor, Councilmember Stipp, you're talking about the Lakin area where we annexed the property in the 303 area?
Nope. What's that called? What we refer to as Rainbow Valley. Okay,
that was a rezoning. Yes, sir. So many of the issues are very substantially similar. Water, sewer, transportation, parks, and fire response are very, very similar. There are some differences with regard to water and sewer availability with this property, but again, those are things that we would have to work through with the developer, but very, very similar.
And this property is directly north of that Rainbow Valley property, if I remember correctly?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
So it doesn't really change the geography. We're not pushing farther south. We're not pushing farther west. We're just connecting what we've already zoned and approved, if I remember this correctly.
Yeah, if I can just go back to the map here for a second. I would agree with what you were saying, Councilmember Stipp. It is pushing the city limits just a little bit west. Right here is the current city limit line, so it would move west to pick this up. So a little bit further west, but not materially.
So the challenges are roughly the same. The geography is roughly the same. So from my perspective, this is kind of the same. So I'm just speaking for me, but if it walks like a duck and quacks like a duck, chances are it's a duck. So. Right. So for me, I'm in support of moving forward with the understanding that we obviously have issues to work out, and I think the developer and or the landowner is aware of that. So I'd like to explore it. Nothing can get built unless we can serve it, And I think that's what the purpose of the development agreement is.
Correct.
Regarding the BLM properties, I would like to see as detailed a presentation on the BLM properties as I did on this Terrasante thing to see whether we should go through with it or not. If we're annexing the BLM property just to have the property, then I don't know if there's any advantage to it. All that means is it's more area for us to service, more rural area for our police officers to try to track down whatever is occurring in there. Right now in BLM land, it's BLM's problem. As soon as we take it on, we assume responsibility for the maintenance and care of that area. So I'd really like to have a lot more information before and since you're asking for an opinion, before I offer an opinion.
Sure.
So with that, I think that ends my questions pending what everybody else has.
Sure.
Thank you very much. You brought up a lot of good concerns that, you know, I think Bill brought up eased a little my concerns with what he said about where it's located. It really does make a lot more sense. I am obviously very concerned about the water issue, and I think we definitely have to get that taken care of, roads and sewers, and see how we're going to do that. But I don't think it should stop. I don't have a problem going forward with it. For the BLM land, that's state land, right?
Federal.
Federal land. Is there anything built on that, or is it just
No.
is it just wildlife habitat pretty much?
Pretty much wildlife habitat. One of the parcels has some topography to it, but pretty much it's just vacant land.
Yeah, if it wouldn't add a cost, because if it's just that, I don't think there's going to be a lot of costs to maintaining it. That might be good to round out that section for the city of Goodyear. I don't have a problem with that. Obviously, if there's going to be an extreme cost to maintaining it, then my opinion might change. But if it's just basically rural wildlife and it's people aren't living there and we don't support it and bring water to it, and if it's federal land, obviously if someone at some point wanted to buy it from the federal government, then that would be a whole other discussion about a development agreement with them that we wouldn't have to serve. I was also really concerned that has been an issue, the hospital, that when you put that slide up there, I kind of gasped. That seems like an awful, just from Canamia, seems like an awful long time. There's no roads really to take down to Maricopa, and I don't believe there's a hospital in Maricopa, so Abrazo is the closest hospital?
Yes, ma'am.
So there's nothing anywhere else? Okay. Yeah, I guess there's not much there, but yeah, just those areas that you pointed out, I think we need to resolve those with fire and everything to go forward, but I think we have a good start. Okay?
It's a follow-up to Sherry's statement.
Okay.
It's the same hospital that serves the city of Buckeye and west of Buckeye. So let's not freak out about how far away it is from the hospital, because it is the only hospital here in the West. And I think we need to keep that in perspective. That's all I wanted to.
I agree. It's just when you see it up there, it's like, wow, that is the only one out in the West. And that is kind of, I guess, a concern that maybe is another discussion for another day for the West Valley entirely. Thank you.
Bigger one.
Personally, I'm not interested in exploring BNL. I just think it's nice every once in a while to keep some of that reserved for a natural instead of taking it over and putting more houses or whatever on it. And if it's a federal land for natural habitat for wildlife, I'd like to keep it that way. That's my own 2 cents worth. As far as moving forward, I don't have a problem, but to me, it's almost like the cart before the horse. Before I can agree to any annexation, I would love to see the results of the development agreement that address all of those issues. And if I'm happy with all of the issues that are addressed, then I could probably go with the annexation. But I'd have to feel comfortable that all the problems are resolved, the water issue, the fire issue, and when it comes to the hospital, all I ask is when we do start building down there, is that they're notified, whoever's buying houses, how far the closest hospital is. That's all. I think they need to be aware that if they're going to buy there, then they got a 30-minute trip to it. That's all. But I realize it serves Buckeye and et cetera, but my understanding is they're having some issues right now, even on service, the one we have right now. So I just want people to be aware of, just like when we do the CFDs, they're aware what it's costing, what it's querying, where they're at, and what distance is involved to get to whatever they need. So that's kind of where I'm at.
Laura?
Well, our future is south, and we've talked about that, and it's, I appreciate Bill putting it in perspective, the geography. I think that probably would have been a little helpful in the presentation, just so we can see, because it's just not out there by itself. To echo what Joe said, I think it is a bit of a leap of faith. I mean, we're casting a vision to the south, but there's a lot that has to be worked out. And so we may say, yes, take the time and the resources to do it, but honestly, the water looks pretty insurmountable. No wet water, physical availability for water, and would be interested in any information about what those creative solutions might look like. I mean, is it attainable? And on the BLM land, if it's annexed, what happens to the land? Does it just go up for sale or what?
No, ma'am. It could be still owned by the federal government, but it would just be in the city limits, much like the portions of the Sonoran Valley Monument down south, a little further south. So it'd be the same exact kind of situation.
Okay. Well, it is interesting because it's contiguous to what the development is. But I don't know. I don't feel like I have enough information to say that we should go for it or not, especially knowing that we have such big barriers at what we're looking at now. So I don't really have a thought about the BLM land personally.
Molly?
Well, I share the concern about the BLM land, Christopher, because this was before your time, but we have worked for over 20 years to get the Sonoran Parkway up down there. And it took us over 5 years to get the environmental report back from the feds because of all the wildlife. So I certainly don't want to take over their wildlife corridors, because then we would be so constrained we can't do anything with it. And I think that's a liability that this city doesn't want to have. It's a nice area, but there's nothing, we can't do anything with it. And I don't want us to do another annexation and be like we have ended up with Mobile, because that is an absolute nightmare. And the cost is staggering. Now, if you can work out all of the details in a development agreement where this city is not absorbing an exorbitant amount of money or having to do an exorbitant amount of infrastructure ourselves at our cost, I'm interested in having you look at it, but not necessarily doing. But I'm like Joe, I want to see the development agreement. We absolutely cannot be building out there without a fire department, and it has to be fully staffed completely. And it has to be done before those houses are built, I think, because I don't think we can get to them quick enough. But other than that, I don't know how much is it going to cost our city for our staff to go look into this. How much staff time is going to be spent? I mean, is this a 2-month, a 4-month, a 6-month staff assignment on top of everything else we're doing, or what? How does that play out?
Vice Mayor, Councilmember Campbell, that's a great question. So with the BLM property, I think there's probably initially not a whole lot of staff time, because BLM is going to say yes or no. And if they say no, we're done. On Terrasante, the development agreement, I think that obviously the issues associated with the infrastructure is quite a heavy lift, and there's a lot of things to work through. And there will be a significant amount of staff time, including our friends in legal involved as well. Can't give you an exact hourly estimate, but I can tell you that using Councilmember Stipp comparable with Rainbow Valley, there was a lot of staff time put into that and creating those solutions, which council ultimately approved. And we would see a very similar effort involved in working on the Terrasante project.
Now, is this annexation anywhere near where the Sonoran Parkway is being proposed?
No, ma'am. This is further west.
It's further west.
Yes, ma'am.
Good. Okay. Because I didn't want us to have to go back and redo anything we've already done.
No, the Sonoran Valley Parkway project is not impacted one iota by what this is.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for the presentation.
I had a question here too. Do you have another one? Okay, go ahead, Bill.
Christopher, can you use, obviously not specifically, but a lot of the legwork that was already done with the Rainbow Valley can be used as a good boilerplate to get started with this particular project.
There is, Vice Mayor, Councilmember Stipp, there is a lot of information that can be transferable. However, especially with regard to water and sewer, those solutions are going to be unique to this particular property.
Right.
Other things, such as the park solutions and things of that nature, probably would be very, very similar. But the heavy lift is with water and sewer.
Yeah, and I don't think there's any question in anyone's mind whether or not that will be that's the big question mark. The way the Rainbow Valley thing occurred, that was a from scratch event. So if it took us 1,000 hours, just using it as an example, we probably have 700 hours worth of time already done. So now we're talking, it's not going to be the same 1,000 hours, I guess is the point I'm trying to make. So again, just a kind of a point of clarification on what it is that we talk about and trying to get it into the right frame. So I'm all done.
Okay. Well, it might be more. We'll see. So I think everybody kind of answered a lot of the questions. So I think to Bill's point, this wraps around past the old abandoned tree farm over to the dairy. Not this particular one, but the other part that we talked about, I think a year ago, the other annexation part. Does it go directly south of this?
So when we did a work session with council about annexation opportunities in this area, and this property wasn't necessarily absolutely identified because it was a big swath of area that was in the county. It was included in that general area.
Okay.
But yeah, so the 355 acres is obviously outside the city limits, and it is contiguous and right up next to the rest of Terrasante. So if council desires us to annex it, it would go through the process. But the real lift, again, is with the water and sewer.
Okay. And the BLM, I guess I'd need to see more information. I mean, I'm not necessarily opposed. It stays as federal land. It'd be in our planning area.
Yes, sir.
But we would most likely leave it as undevelopable land for recreation or game trails or things like that we talked about.
Yes, sir. So if the BLM said, let's annex the property, we would do a very simple development agreement and say we're not providing any water or sewer or things of that nature for the property necessarily at this time, and kind of zone it for open space, and it would just kind of continue to be the way that it is.
Okay. And then we'd be responsible for cleanup or anything, obviously, to Bill's point, any vandalism or things going on in that area, for example. Okay. And then the medical, I know it's far, and this might be a random question. When does a helicopter come into play? Not that I don't think it's that far. I'm just curious. Is it the severity of the thing that happens, or is it a distance type thing?
I'll phone a friend on that one.
I doubt you're going to get a helicopter for like a cold. I'm just curious. So, yeah.
Good evening, Mayor and Council, Vice Mayor and Council. So all I heard is we're getting a helicopter for the fire department.
Exactly. I want to get you some
Yes.
stuff. So, yeah, exactly. Look at it.
I have a funny story about that one. We do have protocols that's based on using helicopters as your transportation. So it is a time and distance thing, but it's also the event of the severity. So in an instance where it's a child and time is of the essence, or I-10's closed down because they're doing construction, then we may use a helicopter to move them downtown to Phoenix Children's. Mm-hmm. Or a burn patient, where they would have to go to county, which is now known as Valleywise. And again, time and severity, we would move that patient with a helicopter. But because Abrazo West is a trauma center, we tend to move everything by ground to that facility. So,
Okay. Yeah, I wasn't looking for a helicopter. I was just curious when that. I know it's farther out there, but so is Cantamilla, and we don't have a dedicated service for that. So I was just curious in general as we keep moving farther and farther south what that looks like. I had a friend, like you said, for child who kid got bit by 2 rattlesnakes out in Tonopah, and they had to call the helicopter in.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. So time and severity. Yep.
Yeah. So okay, thank you. Okay, that's my off the wall question for the night, and then So I guess you can go to the process map. So I also have concerns about the water and the whole thing that we'll work through over time. But the process map, like you talked about on slide 4. So the next look at this will be public hearing. Is that the next one that we'll see? That you've already worked through all of the items
So,
and have solutions to those at that time. Is that correct?
Vice Mayor, thank you for the question. Yes, what we will do is, as I mentioned, there's the 3 different applications, the zoning, the development agreement,
working together.
and they all have to work together because they all provide solutions to different topics, but none of them solve everything. So all these 3 things have to come together. We would not bring forward the zoning change or anything of that nature or the annexation request if we can't find a solution for the water.
Yeah.
In which case, then there would be no public hearing because we're not annexing 355 acres into the city.
Gotcha.
So we have to have some agreement and concurrence on the solutions that are included in the development agreement in order for all of these things to come forward.
Okay, that's what I thought. I just wanted to clarify for the public and I guess for myself, right at that. So we could say go, and then the answer could be no, that we don't have all the water or resources, and then we wouldn't see it. But if it does, then our second look at this, or yay or nay, would be the public hearing.
Yes.
Held at that point.
And then, if I may, Vice Mayor, there's another way of thinking about this too. Tonight is just policy direction. Do you want us to explore solutions with the owner and the developer? Yes or no? Once we get into the weeds and we come back with the development agreement and things of that, the zoning and the annexation request, formal annexation request for hearing, you'll have a lot more details because those things would all been worked through and solved. And so the level of specificity will get much more granular the further in the process we go.
Okay. Yeah, I'm okay looking at it and pursuing going forward for this area, knowing that there's potentially a lot of stops along the way, potentially hurdles they got to get through. I guess my other side note would be, and we're annexing this, I'd still like as a council look into our planning area, what to do in that annexation process in the future. That's just a side note that I brought up in the past. So as we're annexing this, I know there's other opportunities to annex already in our planning owner. This is outside our planning area, so in our existing planning area. But that's really just a comment for the rest of the council. And then, so I'm on board with at least moving forward with the process to start investigating and moving forward the rest of this.
I have one more question.
Yes.
Christopher, when you do the public hearing, who gets notified and how do you notify them? How wide are you notifying these folks?
Going off the top of it, obviously, everybody within the boundary, all the property owners within the boundary of the subject property. I can get to the map here. So all of the property owners, as you can see, let me get the pointer here. As you can see, there's various different parcels that are located here. Each one of these would be given official notice through the mail. We also have to post signage and newspaper advertisements and things of that nature.
Are people actually living in that area?
I don't think there's anybody that's living in this area currently, but there are
Outliers.
yes, and there's some serious. The property owners, there's different LLCs that own these, and as I understand it, they're interrelated. So there may just be a couple of property owners, but several different LLCs, if that makes sense. Yes.
Yeah. Laura?
So the BLM land, I thought because of it being contiguous to the Tierra Santa that we were thinking that'd be development, but then it came up, it's open space. So what is the vision for the BLM land?
That's a great question. It's since it's outside our city limits right now. Katie, I don't know if you want to come talk about what the general plan addresses for the BLM property, or if you have that information, or even if it did. So,
Okay. Welcome, Katie.
Thank you. So there isn't specifically a vision for BLM property. Now, the BLM is very different than the state land department in that some BLM land is meant to be preserved And then they do, kind of like the state land department, they will sell other pieces of land for development to help their funds so that they can preserve the other parts. So part of the, if you wanted us to explore it, part of the process would be talking to BLM about what their plans are. They create plans for property that they're going to dispose of in the future. My guess is that the property to the north, because of the topography, might be a preservation piece, where the property to the west may be a piece of property that could be sold for development someday, unless there's something I don't know about it that makes them want to preserve it. So again, we typically look at if there's state land or BLM when we're doing annexations, because often, or at least in the past, I mean, it has been quite a long time since we've done these large annexations in Goodyear, but the BLM will not object to an annexation, but they won't necessarily sign off onto it either. So it's kind of, if there was a property we wanted to bring into the city, you can bring it in with the private property, because there's certain tests you have to meet. 51% of the property owners have to sign on. You can't just go and annex BLM land unless they signed up to annex it. Typically, they take a neutral approach to annexation. So it's kind of like you're almost, I hate to use this word, but you're almost forcibly annexing them with the private property, but they're not, we would only do it if they did not object to it and if they were okay with coming into the city. So it's just possible that there could be opportunities for working with them on preservation. Would the city want to preserve that hillside area? With all the other BLM, there's a lot of BLM property in the city of Goodyear, in the southern area. There may be potential for land swaps in the future, land swaps with the state land department, so that certain areas could be preserved and certain areas could be developed. So it's just something we look at when we're looking at the annexation area, just what's going on around the property, what opportunities are there not.
All right, thank you for the additional information. I think to Bill's point, probably a presentation on this would be helpful, because it's a big decision, and I think council is justifiably hesitant about just annexing for the sake of annexing, but it sounds like it may be beneficial, so it's.
Sure.
One of the important things is that annexation isn't necessary. Sometimes you kind of have to annex a BLM piece, because otherwise you'd have like a county island, and that's not the case here. We don't have to annex it.
Yeah.
So.
Sherry?
I agree. I'd like to get more information about what is preservation, what is wildlife corridors or habitat, and what could be preserved and what we could do with it. Because I think if we do decide to go forward with that, and we do end up deciding to go forward with the BLM piece, it sounds like there is the opportunity to basically kind of ring our city with possibly some preservation, so no one's building right up to us at some point, obviously far in the future. And if there's no real cost to it, I think that'd be a great presentation to understand what it can be used for and what to do with it.
I did one more clarifying question on that too. So if it did come in and we annexed it, does it come in zoned as open space, and then we'd have to rezone to development or something else in the future?
Thank you. Per state law, we would have to give it an equivalent zoning under the county, and I just looked, and it does have R43 zoning in the county, which is equivalent to our AU, agricultural 1 dwelling unit per acre. We would need BLM's permission if we wanted to designate it as open space. And part of that would be the conversation with BLM on, is this a property they wish to sell for development in the future, or is this a property they wish to preserve? Because if it is a property they wish to preserve, they may say, yeah, we would be open to you annexing it and then designating it as open space, but we couldn't do that without you can't designate a piece of property as open space without their permission.
Okay. Joe?
What would be the value to us to annex it for open space if they're going to keep it open space, other than we have additional maintenance?
Yeah.
I think at some point, as we continue to grow and grow and grow, it's nice to have these wildlife corridors, and I hope that we take a hard look at changing any of those. Wildlife's got to go somewhere, so we keep taking more and more land from them.
All right. So I think we're good. You have another one? Okay, go ahead. Laura?
Is there public access to BLM land? Can people use it as it currently is for recreation, hiking, things like that, or is it off limits?
It depends on what the BLM land is. So the Sonoran Desert National Monument is a national monument. People can access it. There's other, and for the most part, my understanding is if people aren't doing harm or causing problems, they're not going to run people off the property unless they're.
Yeah, I used to ride my quad out there and other things, so you
Yeah.
can, all over the place, you can be all around there.
Thank you.
Yeah. Bill, do you have something?
So it sounds like we are collectively saying we want more information
On the BLM, well, there's two separate
on
sections here,
on the
so,
BLM issue.
so BLM,
Terrasante move forward, BLM more information.
I don't know,
That's
let's
what-
verify, but, so,
If
would you
I
have something,
could-
Julie?
If I could, thank you, Mayor, Vice Mayor and Council. So the policy direction tonight is whether or not on the Terrasante and then separately on the BLM,
Yeah.
do you want us to move forward and gather more information on both? So there's a lot unknown about the BLM because we haven't done the research and the work to bring forward a proposal or what that looks like. But if council was to direct us to spend time and effort to look into both of those, that's when we would bring the information back.
Yeah, I think we're on board with pursue annexation with Terrasante, and we like the potential work session for the BLM, or look into the BLM land and get back with us on the pros and cons with that. So you can shake your
Vice-
head, give me a wink, something.
Vice Mayor, if I can, so we get, just agree, that's what I heard as well, is that Terrasante will move forward with working with the owner and developer on that. And then the BLM will reach out to BLM and get additional information and schedule another work session with council.
Okay, great. All right. Well, I think that's it. So we have a special meeting immediately following this meeting. There being no further business to discuss, this meeting is adjourned. Welcome back. So I'd like to call this special meeting to order for December 6, 2021. Mayor Lord is not with us tonight. May I have a motion and a second to excuse Mayor Lord?
So move.
Second?
Did you get that? First from Ms. Campbell and second from Joe Pizzillo. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? It passes. All right. A vote may be held to call an executive session for the following. So I'll read these three things we're going to talk about, so bear with me. So pursuant to ARS 38431.03 Alpha 3 and 4, discussion and consultation with the city attorney for legal advice to consider its position and instruct its attorneys regarding the city's position regarding contracts that are the subject of negotiations related to the Civic Square parking rights agreement. Number 2, pursuant to ARS 38431.01 Alpha 3-4, discussion and consultation with the city attorney for legal advice to consider its position and instruct its attorneys regarding the city's position regarding contracts that are the subject of negotiations related to the Third Amendment to the Development Agreement. Number 3, pursuant to ARS 38431.03 Alpha 3 and 4, discussion and consultation with the city attorney for legal advice to consider its position and instruct its attorneys regarding the city's position regarding pending or contemplated litigations or in settlement discussions conducted in order to avoid or resolve litigation regarding the city's application for a certificate of necessity for ambulance services and the intervention of American Medical Response in the certificate of necessity administrative hearing process. I'd like a motion and a second to go into executive session.
Second.
All right, so Bill Stipp with the first, Laura Cano with the second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Nope. Okay, it passes. We will now convene into executive session. now adjourn the executive session and reconvene the special meeting. We have a regular meeting next. There be no further business to discuss. This meeting is adjourned. And then we're going to take a quick 5-minute break.
5 minute? All right.